Good afternoon, Jan. How do you do?
Good afternoon, Michael. Everything all right over there?
Yeah, doing a bit of troubleshooting on our project. We're deploying to Azure and using some Azure functions in order to run some stuff. And one of the functions just stopped working abruptly yesterday afternoon, and so we're kind of going through seeing what dependency changed. It wasn't a code change that caused this, so just trying all sorts of stuff.
And the application is already in production or not yet?
It is. It is not seeing a lot of traffic at all. So fortunately, no actual users have run into this issue yet.
Okay.
But
So you still have time for historical modeling today, or?
yeah. I'm still forcing myself to take a break and think about something else for a while.
No. But if you say no time, you just tell me, and we can put it tomorrow, or the day after, or just next week.
Yeah. I wasn't being terribly effective myself, but some other members of my team are working on some different options that might bear fruit. So I'm letting this be a little bit of time for me to just think about something else, and then I'll jump back into it with them.
Okay. I'm still on the model. Yeah, we keep changing, but I think we are almost there. But the last things are the most difficult stuff. You want to have a look at the model, or you say, "Halt, Jan, I have something else," or
no. Let's jump into the model. Yeah.
The model has grown quite a lot, so I think it would be in one of the first times we spoke about this model. You told me that it was wrong. It was not a good practice to use client also as your own company. I was abusing. Normally, a task is for something I have to do for a client, or for something the workers have to do for a client. But a worker, I made it an employee.
Okay.
An employee can be a worker or a dispatcher. So there is a flag now. Dispatcher is worker. Okay. But so a worker employee, he can also be in a state, I'm not working, I'm off. So I'm in private, which means no GPS coordinates are transmitted to the system. And in private, he has two possibilities. Either he's in private and he doesn't want to be disturbed. He's at a family reunion, or he's on a holiday, or he's going out with the children, or whatever. Or he says, look, my wife went to my mother-in-law with the children. I'm alone at home. We are doing some renovations, so I might like to earn some additional money. Boss, if you have some work, some urgent work to do, call me. So that's the state private, but I'm standby if there is something.
Okay, yeah.
So that state has nothing to do with a task for a client.
Right. Yeah, I like the idea of modeling that independently of tasks for clients. Yeah.
So what I try now, but I'm wondering what you think about it. We still have sessions started.
Yeah, so this model is saying that session started means that you've accepted a task for a.
But I left something out because also there I'm not sure. Okay, when I made this, there was a link, an edge from session started to to the date here, to the date.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So indirectly to the employee. I will tell you
Right.
why I left it out now, but imagine it is still there. So a link between session started
Mm-hmm.
to date. That means if I say session start, and session start, I choose then, where is it? A type of work. So in fact, type of work should be a kind of state. That can be working,
Mm-hmm.
that can be having a meeting with a customer, but that can also be I'm in a private state. So whatever an employee is doing is that type of work. Perhaps we should call it state of employee. But a session doesn't have to be a link to assigned. That's why the question mark is there.
I see. Yeah.
So in that case, it's just a session that goes via a certain date to an employee.
Okay. Yeah. It still. Sorry. Yeah. It still feels like we're overloading some tasks or some facts. So whether the session started is associated with assigned is kind of your switch. It is if this is work for a client, and it isn't if this is something else. If this is private time. So so I think it makes sense to go ahead and model those as two separate tasks. So so you might even, if the name session started really makes a lot of sense in both of those cases, then you might just have a longer name. So client session started and private session started.
You would completely separate them.
Yeah, I think so.
Because actually, in the private case, I would say, okay, it's a session with a type of work, but no assignment, no consumables, no tools.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
It starts, it ends, it has remarks. So the session is in fact the same, only no assignment, no tools, no consumables.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and excuse me, that lack of consumables and and the lack of assignment are kind of things that cement that for me. That excuse me, the use consumable would have a predecessor of a client session started, but you wouldn't use consumable for a private session.
Mm-hmm.
So
you would still separate them completely.
Yeah.
Okay, I will change that.
And then that also kind of calls back to what you were saying about type of work. Is if we've got so right now you've got type of work are the work that you do for clients, but then you were saying let's go ahead and augment that with private not available and private available. And so that's like you've overloaded one fact, the session started, and then that overloading bled into another one. So by separating them, you can say, okay, type of work is just about client work, and then private sessions have a different concept. There might not even be a parallel type of work to go along with it. It might just be an availability field on the private session started. So private session started, available true. Private session started with available false.
So we have more specialized facts then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I will separate them in the two cases then.
Yeah, and I'm kind of getting the same impression with employee, that you've got is dispatcher, is worker. A worker can be assigned a task, but a dispatcher can't. And by reusing employee for both of those, the model is allowing a dispatcher to be assigned a task.
Yeah, but sometimes they can be both. They can be and dispatcher and worker.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah, and it's important to know that somebody is dispatcher, because that means that he has access to the dispatcher application. So that's why I made this.
Okay.
Especially in the small companies where they don't need a full-time dispatcher. So they will send the dispatcher for work and for dispatching. And in the end, he's neither doing one of them good, neither the other.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, but one last thing on that is an alternative could be that the fact doesn't represent the individual human being. The fact represents their role within the supplier. So, so you can have a worker fact represent the same person as a dispatcher fact, if they've got completely different sets of relationships with other facts. So. So like with device, I'm sure a dispatcher can carry a phone, but is that the same thing as this device here? Because this device, we're talking about tracking GPS coordinates on it, and knowing when it has displayed information to the worker. So that device branch is very worker specific, and assigned is still pretty worker specific. So it could be that what you had before with the employee bubble being worker is still accurate, but you just need another dispatcher concept elsewhere that represents whatever you need for a dispatcher.
Yeah, but that would mean that. Then how do you handle somebody who has the both? Because he will have a double identity.
Yeah. So it could be that that user is a predecessor of both of those. So so the user is the fact that holds it's identified by the private or the public key, and so when they log into the system, that's their identity. Now you can see, okay, for this user, I see a worker successor for that supplier. So now I know present this this person with that capability within the application, and while they're using it, they're using that that worker association from this user to that supplier. But if you also see a dispatcher for a supplier, then you can say, okay, now you here's the additional capability within the application for you to dispatch work on behalf of that supplier. And so those are just two different roles that are played by the same user.
So then, in fact, assigned would have as a predecessor is worker.
Yeah.
And
yes.
device would have is dispatcher as a predecessor. Device would have
the
is
device
worker
is for
as well.
Worker as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So so yeah, the way that I would redraw this as change employee back to worker, the way that you had it before, and then give it another predecessor in addition to supplier that's user, and then dispatcher has two predecessors, user and supplier.
Why would dispatcher have user and supplier,
and
not just user?
Because when you log into the system, you are acting as a dispatcher for a particular supplier. So so that user predecessor doesn't have any other predecessors. It is just top level user. All it has identifying it is public key. So somebody has logged into the application, and now you've got this identity associated with them. And this is a multi-tenant application. When they log in, you have to figure out which supplier they're acting on behalf of, and so that's your mechanism. So I log in as this user. I look for my successor dispatcher. I say, okay, I'm a dispatcher for that supplier.
But then worker We can have worker also go directly to supplier then, and not as user. Wait.
Yeah, but if you have worker go to both supplier and user, then that worker logs in. So at the moment of login, all you know is that they're a user, and then you can investigate their successors and say, okay, this user is a worker for that supplier. This user is a dispatcher for that supplier.
It's a bit stupid that I cannot draw on this on this thing. So actually, we have supplier here. That's the supplier. Then we have a user here. Yeah.
I would just not have that successor or that predecessor relationship to supplier. So the user is just its own top-level object.
Okay, it doesn't depend on supplier then.
No, not yet. And that's where worker and dispatcher are going to come in and provide that relationship.
Okay. So here we have worker, he goes to supplier. We have dispatcher, goes to supplier. And then both of them goes to user as well.
Right, exactly.
Okay, and user is the one who has the identity.
Yes. Yes, so a username, password gets you into the system, and now we know what user you are. And then we can interrogate the successors and say, okay, this user has a successor worker for this supplier, so therefore I'll present those features of the application for that specific supplier. This user has a successor dispatcher for that supplier, so I'll present those capabilities for that supplier as well.
So in that way, we could have a user that works for more suppliers.
That is true too, yes.
That might even be interesting. Because some of the workers, they are freelancers. So one day they will work for one supplier, and the next day they will work for another supplier. So in that way, they could work with the same account.
Usually your single sign-in.
But then they will, if they use their own phone, it would not be a problem. Because they will get their tasks for one supplier, they will get the tasks for the next day for the other supplier. But they should not be using a phone from the supplier. Because then the data from another supplier gets on the phone of...
all of the data is successors of worker, primarily worker. So that means that that it's still within the it's kind of within the tenant of the supplier. So since worker has a predecessor supplier, you can follow supplier. You can follow that data all the way up to a supplier, and you know, okay, that data belongs to that supplier. So you've got a multi-tenant application on the back end. This is allowing that tenant to be, or that application to be multi-tenant on the front end as well.
Yeah, but imagine so that worker. So in this case, that's the worker. So he has the device goes. The device goes to the worker.
Yeah, so in that case, it's now becoming pretty clear, if this indeed is the correct model, that the thing called device here is not a physical device. It is it's sort of the logical. This is all the information about this physical device within the context of that person's employment status with that supplier. So it's a scoped idea.
Yeah, but then what happens? Because somewhere a supplier has to give permission to the user to be a worker at his company.
Right. So yeah, with this model, it would be like an invitation kind of system. And oh, hello, Jen. Good to see you. Thank you for joining in. Sorry, somebody on Twitch. And right, so with this model, it would be like an invitation. So I've, as a worker, I've come to your site and I've set up an account, and then that supplier sends me an invitation, like through an email. I click a magic link or something, and then that associates my account with that supplier. That creates the worker fact. That's the association. And then I could get an invitation from somebody else using the same login credentials. I can then be associated with a different supplier. So that would be kind of the experience that this model is talking about. If indeed you want different credentials for different suppliers, then it would be a different experience. So supplier comes in, creates an account, sets things up, and starts to create logins for specific workers, and then gives them their username and password, and then they can move forward from there. And then in that case, it would be a different identity for each supplier, and this model would not be accurate.
I see advantages in both, because it might be that the telephones belong to the freelancers, they use their own telephone. And I think then this model is great, because they only have to install the software once and create an account. But it might be that the company gives them a phone that they use for a day. So they go to the company, they pick up the machines, and they get a phone for that day or that week that they work with that company. And the next week they go to another company as a freelancer. But they use the phone from that company. So in that case, if they forget to log out on the phone of another company, then we are in trouble.
Yeah. So in particular, this device is capturing GPS coordinates. So the way it's modeled here, the device is associated with the worker, which is the relationship between a human and a supplier. And so those GPS coordinates are captured within the context of a specific supplier. If it ends up being the wrong supplier, now you've just given that person's personal information over to the wrong entity. And
perhaps also is next tasks, which are already sent from the next supplier to his phone. I will think about that.
Okay. Yeah, that's a tough decision, and that's one of those decisions that you want to get right at the beginning, because it's at the very top of your model.
Let's go back to the other screen. I thought it's going to be the last time that we talk about this model. But
well, these things evolve. So yeah, I think we're iterating towards something that we can really start coding against. But then as we get into code, it's going to evolve even further.
But okay, we will get there. Then I added an is done. Is it readable like this?
Yes. Yeah, I can still read it.
Okay. An is done flag to the task. Why? Because the moment that a task is finished, it has to disappear from the screens of the workers. Then received and seen flags. We discussed last time that we would put them on all the items, like go to, work for, description. But there is a very special one, assigned, because assigned can be deleted and restored. Yeah, the green ones can be deleted and restored. So we will have to put seen and received flags on each deleted and each restored flag as well.
Yeah. Yeah, because it'll be important for you to know that that this worker saw that they are no longer assigned.
Yeah.
So yeah, if they end up going out to the to the client and then they pull up their phone and conversation ensues, now you can you can say, well, yeah, this says that you saw it.
The risk exists that, for example, the task was the dispatcher put it in the day before. Then the worker, he goes home, he has no connection. So in the morning, he sees, I have to go there. He goes there, but the task is already deleted, and he starts working. And the moment that he receives the deleted thing, he was already working. So I cannot just throw everything away because these hours have been done.
Yes.
And he has to be notified as soon as possible that it was deleted. That's why this deletion, it's important for the dispatcher to see that the deletion has been seen by the worker. Okay.
Yep. So you can have a deletion on an assigned, and you can still have a session started on that same assigned in that situation. And now you can go back in history and you can see, oh, he started working even though I unassigned him. So yeah, we're going to have to pay him for that work, but then we'll have to figure out, do we?
It's a distributed system, so we have no choice.
Yeah.
Then for these consumables, I did it this way. Last time we were discussing about would we put it to session ended or session started. And in the end, I say, okay, let's follow your ID of session started. In that way, once the session is started, the worker can say, okay, I'm using this tool or I'm using these consumables. He doesn't have to wait until he terminates the session to add all these things. And that's why I made used consumables as a successor of session started and the consumable. And the same with the tools. So used consumable has an amount. And used tool, I also put an amount on it.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Why? It's just for invoicing. We are not using that tool. We are not consuming it. But usually a machine will be invoiced by the hour.
Oh, right. Okay.
And then we have it from session started to session ended. But a machine can also be invoiced at the same time or separately, for example, by units produced.
Yeah.
Or a cubic meter of grass which has been, or corn which has been cut. So another quantity than just hours.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that amount will have to be used here. So the moment that, so the guy, he says, okay, I'm using that machine. And the moment that he ends the session, the machine will have on the display, for example, you have produced so many units, or it has been produced so many liters of this product, and then he will add the amount. Okay.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Then a session started has a remark or a description. Of course we need to record when it started and when the session ended. And there are things that can be corrected afterwards.
And so it's a successor and not just a field. Yep. Yep. I like it.
In the same way, so now we have bring consumable, bring tool, and we have used consumable and used tool. And we might, in the future, also add in this way, not only bring, but also brought consumable. Because the dispatcher say you bring this, but perhaps we brought another tool.
Yeah.
So we can have bring tool, brought tool, use tool, and returned tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Not for the moment, but
Yeah.
that are things that we could.
Okay. Yeah, that lets you keep track of inventory of tools and of consumables, and yeah. Those could be some really, really valuable features for the next version.
Then let's go back to this GPS. To this date, I've also added, for example, one thing that might interest us is the battery level of the phone. Now, we are not recording battery level all the time, but it did happen that one of the workers was not really enthusiastic. So he switched off the device, and the reason was that the battery was empty. But my client was not really convinced that the battery was empty, that it was not the worker itself who switched it off. So in that case, the client called me and said, Jan, can you see whether his battery is empty? I said, no, I cannot see it. But that might be a feature that we can, via a setting, enable or disable. Yeah. And so then one of the things at battery level, we might have a lot of things which we can enable, disable, and then it's locked to a date, to a device.
Yeah. Now, that's so on the modeling front. I think that is exactly the right place to put that. On the managing human beings front, it's sad that you would have to even capture that information.
Yeah, but that's my client who is asking for it. I don't care how. I don't care. It's not my responsibility to go to tell my customer, you have to manage your people that way.
Yeah, trust your people. Just ship the software. No, trust your people. All right, I'll go with somebody else then.
So battery level. Okay, then to the GPS. These were so we have the raw GPS points. I would like to have a GPS point, for example, every 1 second. But we are not going to transmit that because all these facts. But then we will analyze these points and we will make optimized points. So if we are driving on an expressway, we are going straight. So the moment we enter the expressway, until the expressway makes a turn, we just need 2 points. Yeah. So we interpolate between the points, and we have only a minimal number of points to represent all the other points with a certain accuracy. Okay. So this number of points will be much lower than 1 per second. We might have 1 per 5 minutes or whatever. And the moment that the road turns, then we might have 1 per second or 1 per 5 seconds. So it's really adapted on the way we go.
Okay. Can you help me understand the difference between raw and GPS raw? So what information is in each one of those facts, and what's the cardinality relationship there?
I saw that as a collection. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you need to explicitly model the collection because you're already collecting the GPS raw under a date. So every time you emit one of those facts, it's going to be.
Yeah, but otherwise, how are we going to know which points are? Yeah, it's in the fact type.
Yeah,
it's a different fact, so it's in the fact type. Okay.
Yeah.
So raw and optimized. Yeah. Sometimes it's so evident that we can just leave that away because it's in the type of the fact. It's 2 different facts. And then the optimized points. So the other ones, you have a point every 1 second, for example. So if you are points missing, you will know it. Yeah, because for example, during 5 minutes you don't see a point. That means that you were points missing. With the optimized points, you don't know when you're missing points. Because if 2 points are 5 minutes between the 2 points, then you assume that there is a straight line between the two. Or that he has been, if the 2 points are almost the same, that he has never been away for the whole day. He was there from morning until evening. But that might not be true. That's why I add a flag last point. And after that last, if it's the last point, that means I have lost points after that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So, and that will be a setting. When do we call a point a last point? For example, if we have during 5 minutes no GPS points, or during 5 seconds, that's something you have to decide. It's not because we miss one GPS point that we are going to interrupt it. The dispatcher, he doesn't care, for example, if there is a gap between 3 minutes. So then on the map, we just draw a line between the points. But if it's a gap from 1 hour, then we are not sure anymore. He might have gone like this, or he might have gone straight. We don't know. So that's why we need to have that information.
Yeah. Or they might have stopped for lunch, and so we need to double check that against their private sessions and see. Okay, did you record that you stopped for lunch? So with the raw versus optimized, is that something you envision happening on the device, or do you think the device is going to send all the raw and then the optimization happens on the server?
No, we do that on the device, because imagine we capture a point every second, which is the most we can do. But some customers really want the most out of it. But even if you say every 15 seconds, it's going to be a lot of data. And it's complete waste. So I prefer to calculate it on the device. The phones are fast enough. And then just send the optimized data. The raw data, I might want it from time to time, just for diagnostic purposes. But that will just be a comment that we give, send me the raw data. And then we have a setting somewhere that says, okay, raw data has to be, cannot be thrown away for example, 24 hours. Has to be kept on the device for 24 hours, or has to be transmitted, and then you can throw it away, something like that. But usually, I would just throw this away on the device once it has been optimized.
Okay, yeah. So you're capturing it in the model, but how you implement it in the software is probably going to be a bit different than the other facts. Yeah. But yeah, it still belongs in that same place in the model. Yeah.
So that might be facts that we throw away in the end. That's not very immutable, but and then we have a flag send location now here, this one. Because these optimized points. Imagine the guy is driving on an expressway straight for half an hour. The dispatcher might want to know where is he. So at a certain moment he says, so then he sends a flag, send location now, and then the location will be sent immediately. So it will be an intermediate point, an additional point, but it will be sent immediately.
Okay, that might belong under the date as well, since you know that you're going to be recording one of those facts at a specific point in time. So that way, that can be part of that date that can then be archived.
Then the difficult things. So we added date in the GPS, and last time we discussed that we should have a date here as well in task.
Yes.
And we should also have a date in assigned.
Yeah, that is. Yep. So so even though it's probably the same date, it might be the very next date that they are assigned. Yeah. So the task is created on one date, they're assigned it on another date, and it's for work to be done at some other date in the future. So those dates are not related, but still, if you come from employee and you're looking for your assignments. Without that date period in between, then you will just over time see more and more assignments that you'll have to and you'll have to ignore most of them because most of them have already been completed. so yeah, having date in between employee and assigned lets you now limit your scope. So okay, I'm looking for assignments for that I received today. I'm looking for assignments that I received yesterday, and you can control how far back in the past you look for assignments.
Yeah, but what date, for example, here for task, we have the day that we create the task. We have also the day for which the task is scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is a task can be long running. We can create a task today, which has to be executed next year.
Right.
So we are never sure that that task is finished, because I could say, for example, I don't take it by day here, I take it by month, or by day, and I go back 30 days. But who guarantees me that the task was not created last year?
Right. Yeah. Yep. So that does create a problem. So with the way it is now, a task is just for a particular supplier. You don't even know which client that task is for until you go down to a successor and you say work for this client. So it might be that the only query you need to do from the supplier side, so this would be as a dispatcher, you're looking at the tasks that you've got set up. Perhaps that query is always starting at a client. So, hey, for this client, show me work for this client, and then that gets you to all the tasks because you can bounce up from work for. And so in that case, if you're not querying directly from supplier to task, then you don't have to worry about organizing them in in buckets of limited size. And then the client itself is kind of a bucket of limited size. This is what I like to refer to as human-sized data, where like GPS coordinates, there's a device that's spitting those out, so they just shoot off the map, literally. But in this case, a supplier is only going to do so much work for a client in the entire life. So if you consider that to be a decent chunk, if you don't consider that to be a huge amount of tasks, and you can only tell that by the domain, then you don't need to inject any kind of a period. So yeah, basically I'm just turning the question back around. As a dispatcher, if I search for the tasks that are assigned or that are work for a specific client, and I get back all of my tasks, but I just have to ignore the ones that have already been finished. What is the duration of a supplier's relationship with a client, and how many tasks would that be?
That should be possible, but the query, what are all the ongoing tasks,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's still an important query.
Mm.
Because the moment that a dispatcher wants to schedule all the tasks, it's not about one client, he's talking about all the clients.
Yeah.
Now, only the tasks that are not finished, he needs to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if the period were a year, and then you said, okay, when I run that query, I look at this year and last year. Yeah. How confident would you be that that a task would be finished before that that query is up? And if you express the query that way, like right now, this year and last year means anything that that was any tasks that were created as of January 2020 and up till now. So that period, even though we're talking about 2 distinct years, it is really just over 1 year. So that's a a very chunky windowed type of query. So it could be you say, okay, I'm going to look.
It could be 2 years, but it could be
2 in the past.
Between 1 and 2 years.
Yeah. So so that might be where you find the balance, where you choose a larger period, and then you will necessarily have more results per period, but they will still be bounded. They'll still be human sized. There's still only so much work that you can do within a year.
Yeah. I think if there is no other solution, then we will have to educate the customer and say, look, you cannot, if a task goes over a year, then you just have to start a new task, which is not unreasonable. That tasks are limited within one working year.
Yeah. You might also have a way to toggle that limit. So it's like, no, show me all tasks throughout all time. Okay, you're going to wait for it, and then it pulls that back. But at least that's all server side type of queries. When you're talking about an employee's assignments, now you're talking things that are going to happen on the device, and so looking back through all time in order to see your current assignments, that is going to slow down over time unless you do have the period on that side. So yeah, I think you definitely want a period on the employee assigned side, and you might want a period on the supplier task side as well. But they can be different periods. Tasks can be for years, and employee assignments can be for days.
Okay, I think that's a good strategy, where I can just give themselves the possibility to set the interval, or to decide on the interval, and if they go for a longer interval, they just have to wait longer.
Yeah, interval is in number of years. Yeah, when you first said that, I thought you were saying you can choose to do this at a monthly basis, or you at an annual basis, and that would be a little bit difficult to get right in a multi-tenant system. But yeah, just choosing the number of years to go back, that makes a lot of sense.
No, but what I can do is, for example, cut it up in months, the period of a month, and they can decide whether they go and analyze 2 months, 3 months, 12 months, 24 months.
Yeah.
So the buckets are smaller, and if they take 2 buckets or 10 buckets, and they can just choose.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so with a month-size bucket, then you've got more granularity as to the number of choices you can make.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we have the same here, but okay, that works. Schedule and supplier. I was thinking but I think it's not going to work. We could build in a period pattern between supplier and schedule. But you don't always have a schedule yet. So in that case, we would have a date, but also an unknown date. But in the end, the unknown date, so the moment that you put this schedule here, that you enter something, the predecessor will change to another date.
Yeah.
The
So
successor.
Yeah. So I think I don't think that you need to do that, because the solution, or the problem that the period pattern is solving is querying for a set of successors that without a period would just grow unbounded, and most of those successors will eventually be excluded by some kind of condition. Like I think one of the examples that I gave in the book was about a queue, and so you you put work into a queue, you work it. Most things that are put into a queue are eventually worked, and so if if the work having been done is the condition for the queue, which I advocate that it should be, then that means that condition excludes most of the things in the query, and then you just get the full the small number that you still have to work on. Okay. So inject a period so that limits the the total amount that you see in there. So in the case of the schedule, you are searching for schedule facts through the task. So what are the how many schedule facts do you expect to be part of a task? And that would just be how many times do you expect to reschedule the same task. So for those long-running tasks, it might be that you're scheduling them out every day, and then in that case, that might be
it becomes
a concern. Again. But if you are educating people on closing a task and starting a new one, so tasks shouldn't be long-running; they should be within the scope of a year. Now, schedule is going to be on the order of 300 at the most successors, and that's not going to be too much to go through and eliminate those that have already been worked.
Okay.
So yeah, I would just kind of think through that specific query from task down to schedule. Is it necessary to carve up the time there?
Okay, so just keep it simple and use the pattern that we discussed before.
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm. Then the next one, is it useful for all the facts that we have, which are generated on a device, to have the device as a predecessor? So in that way, we know for every fact where it was generated. Or will that technically give overhead?
Yeah. So we're already seeing all of these GPS coordinates and battery level and everything are they're already related to device, but the other things like session started. If that is something that you would find really important, and it's something that you couldn't infer from something else in the data model. So you, as a person just kind of analyzing this data, you could see the GPS coordinates of this device that occurred on a specific date, and then kind of cross-reference that with the sessions that they started, and you could sort of infer, okay, they must have started that session on that device. So that's a lot of human processing happening to make that inference. So if there's some automated process, if there's some report that you need to run that needs to make that inference, then
well, for the moment, no. But it gives us additional information which might be interesting afterwards to analyze certain problems. And I was just wondering, is it something that in your experience, in your models, did you do that? Every fact you give the origin of the fact? You include the origin of the fact, or?
I typically don't, and that's specifically because I'm thinking about location independence, and this history should be valid no matter where it is, and so you should be able to contribute to that history no matter where you are, and so putting too much of that device information into the model then kind of builds in some constraints that you might not want. Like, for example, if device is a predecessor of session started, then are you implying that when you end the session, you're ending it from the same device? Or do you then capture that device again? So now you can start a session on one device, log in another one, end it there, and you've now captured two different predecessors for those two different facts.
In theory, it's possible. Huh? It's possible. And imagine that a worker started a session and then his telephone crashes. It will be with another telephone that he ends the session. So yes, it does happen. The only thing that we have with making this link from every fact to a device is additional overhead of data.
Yeah. And if you were ever to, from the device, query down for all of the successors, then you would get this huge mess of these are all the sessions that were started on this device. So it doesn't sound like that the query from that direction would be important. It would really be just from the perspective of, now I'm seeing the sessions and I want this additional meta information about which device was used to create the fact. So I tend
more
not to
diagnostic tool. It's more diagnostic tool.
Yeah. So if used carefully, I don't see a huge argument against it. But it is something that I tend not to do.
You never needed it.
Yeah.
Okay. I think for the moment we will leave it out then.
Yeah. Now the person that did a thing, that's always very useful information. But anytime that is that information is needed, you already have an arrow that gets you up to employee by some path. So I mean, you don't have any indication over here on the task or the on that side of the dispatcher that created that task. But yeah, certainly for the employee, you've got all those errors going to employee, and that kind of reveals an important aspect of this problem domain. This is tracking the work done by certain kinds of employees.
Yeah, there we might have a task, have a link to dispatcher. Then we know who created it. Because a task can also be created by the employee itself when it creates a task on the spot in the field. So that's important to know. Okay, I will add that. Yeah, and so then if you do go with the model where you've got user and then dispatcher and worker are successors of user, then you would want the task to have the relationship back to the user. For exactly that reason that you mentioned, is that it could have been an employee or a worker, could have been a dispatcher. All you know is that it was this specific human being that did it. So that identity. Yeah.
And then you can kind of infer the relationship that person has with the supplier in order to figure out why they created that task.
Okay. Now another difficult question, Michael. we already have a lot of scene.
Running close to the end of time, and you give me another difficult question.
Yeah, last question. The rest is for next week. We already have a lot of seen and received flags. Yeah, on address, on go to, and so on. no, not on address, on go to, on work for, and so on. But now imagine that the address of a yard changes.
Mm-hmm.
How can we notify the worker of that address has been changed, and how can the dispatcher know that it has been seen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this, you might use the same pattern as you do for the others. It just seems like this happens a lot less frequently. Because the other tasks are about instructions that you're giving to the worker, versus the address is some supplementary information. Certainly very important information. Drive to this location, but it's something that should happen. That should change very infrequently. So if you follow the same pattern out of consistency, then you're at least capturing that information that they saw the address. If the concern is about notifying them while they might be en route, or while they might be might not yet have downloaded their data, about a correction to a clerical error. Hey, we put in the wrong address. We need to inform you, don't go to that that place on the map. Go somewhere else. I might actually just go ahead and let that be solved outside of the system.
Automatically the new address will be sent to the telephone, and as long as the fact has no flag seen, I can generate a notification. So that's the notification then. But to make sure that the dispatcher knows it has seen, I have to add received and seen flag on address as well. And we might have the same problem. I don't know. For example, the contact person of a client, his telephone number changed. So a client might have a contact person, he might have a telephone number. So we are somewhere in the leaves, far away from the task. So we might, I think we just have to see, is it important or not? Is it important enough to add a flag here? Or in these exceptional cases, do we just call up the technician and say, hey, be careful. Have you seen that the telephone number has been changed?
It feels to me like we're trying to put too much of the responsibility on the software and on the model, and that is the sort of thing that a dispatcher should be trained to do.
So that we just have, for the common things, we have seen received flags, things that seldom happen. The address change after the moment that it has been assigned to, that the task has been assigned, is something that rarely changes. So we might just call up the technician and say, look. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Well, you might have heard all of those notification bells going off. It sounds like my team is back from lunch and trying to work the problem.
Then I keep that for next week, Michael.
All right.
So, thank you very much. Good luck. Good luck with your problem. I hope you won't have to work through the night.
Yeah, thank you. I think we'll have a solution by the end of the workday.
Okay.
Feels pretty good.
See you next week, Michael.
All right. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, John.